Hi, I'm John Nerrell, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. So today is episode 5, and I'm digging back into the archives a little bit because I'm going to share with you a conversation I had with one of my Show Up Challenge participants. Her name is Clare Simmons. She's an outstanding project manager, and I'm excited to bring you her story today. Now, from time to time on this podcast, I think it is important for you to hear success stories and to hear from other leaders in the field about how they've navigated what mid-career has been for them or the lessons that they've learned. So if you or someone you know think would be a great guest for the podcast, then first and foremost, go ahead and email me at john@johnnerrell.com or connect with me on LinkedIn at John Nerrell, or even on Facebook and Instagram at John Nerrell Coaching, and drop me a message, because as I'm building this podcast, I definitely want to have more conversations with people around what they are learning in mid-career and how they are navigating. I do have some guests lined up that I'm excited to bring to you over the next couple of months. But it was important for me after last episode where I talked about my Show Up 6 strategies that I shared this conversation I had with Clare Simmons from my previous podcast, Show Up 2020. Now, Clare is an outstanding project manager, and she joined my Show Up Challenge with a handful of other people last year to dig more deeply into the strategies in my book, Show Up: 6 Strategies to Lead a More Energetic and Impactful Career. Now, the way the challenge worked was that every couple of weeks, the participants got a video or audio from me, a worksheet that digged a little bit deeper into the content of the book. And then they read a certain section of that book for us to come back and engage and discuss. So whether it be we had a separate Facebook group for that. And then every 2 weeks, we had a group coaching call. And it was an opportunity for us to explore a little more what that particular strategy was meaning for them. And Clare and I had met a few months before the challenge started. And as part of someone who was looking to find a new job, I'm sure you can understand that making a job search during the pandemic was not only a little challenging, but also something that you might sit there and go, well, why would you want to do that? Right? So for Clare, she was actively looking at moving or switching jobs during the pandemic. And there were months and months on end where she heard nothing. You know what that frustration is like when you are applying for positions and you're not hearing anything. Back a couple episodes ago, in terms of when I was talking about navigating your mid-career transition arc in episode 3, we talked about the power of yet. Right? And how just simply saying yet helps you shift your energy as you're looking at these certain situations or circumstances through a very particular lens. Well, for Clare, she had heard nothing. And then all of a sudden, it was like someone flipped a switch and she was getting interview after interview. And ultimately, she ended up receiving 2 job offers at the same time. I wanted to reshare this episode with you in this podcast because Clare opens up about her thoughts during this time and the struggle she had about finding a job during a pandemic. right? And it was about how she was managing her mind to keep going and moving toward that goal of finding that job where she was going to be able to add the most value. And we talk a little bit about which strategies were the most helpful for her in this career transition. So I'm happy to report she's doing really, really well and definitely making a greater impact in her job. But I hope you enjoy my conversation with Clare Simmons from just a few months ago that I wanted to share here as well. So enjoy, listen for some of those things that are big takeaways for you. And remember, how we show up matters. Enjoy my conversation with Project Manager Clare Simmons. Clare, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, John.
So, Clare, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast, and your bio is fantastic, but we have to call out here that in the middle of a pandemic, you decide to go find a new job in a time when a lot of people have either held themselves back from looking for a new job or questioned as to whether or not it was really possible for them. And so to let the listeners in a little bit on your thought process, what were some of the reasons that led you to decide to start looking for another job in this epic year?
Sure. So, John, I'd been working for the same company for pretty close to 6 years. We're a training and education company. We had a very successful contract with Department of Homeland Security for about 4.5, almost 5 years, training people in emergency preparedness and active shooter preparedness and emergency planning across the United States. So when that contract ended, we branched out into the private sector, and with our primary business function being in-person training and assisting organizations in building emergency action plans, a lot of people weren't really doing that. So the revenue stream that we had coming into our small business really dwindled. And so I didn't see much career longevity with that company anymore. So I really wanted to find an organization where I could have a little bit more stability. Again, I loved what I was doing. It was a very good company, great mission. But since our focus was training and people aren't going into the office or doing any in-person training, it just was time to start looking for another opportunity for me.
And thank you for sharing that. But I mean, that makes so much sense because for you and for so many people out there, they have either been furloughed, laid off, had their hours cut, have had to take a reduction in compensation, and even still work at a full workload. And these are all the things that, while understandably being loyal to your company and doing the quality work and everything, at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge we have to look out for ourselves and what's best. And so you make this decision to start looking for a new job. Let us in a little bit about what was the process you went through to get everything in order to actually start looking for a new job. And also, when did you start this whole process?
Sure. So I had been starting this process off and on. I want to say I really started heavily looking at the beginning of the summer. The first thing that I did was I looked at my resume, updated it with as much information as I thought would be possible to help me find a new opportunity. And I was looking for anything on job posting sites that had any sort of similarities or crossovers into what I had been doing at my previous company. One of the things that started to stick out to individuals that I noticed when I was speaking to them was my experience with Department of Homeland Security and the work that I had done on that contract there, which led to several contingent offers actually coming my way. Being in the field of government contracting, that is unfortunately something over the summer, and especially as you get towards the end of the fiscal year, that really ramps up when people are trying to look to find the best team when they're putting these proposals together for the federal government. So that was starting to get some attraction based upon my resume, my experience. But unfortunately, as it goes with the federal government, since it's a contingent offer, they can only choose one vendor for that opportunity and that contract. And of the opportunities that I had, the contingent offers, nothing came through. So I realized towards the end of September that, okay, this is not happening. Meanwhile, in my job that I was currently working, because we weren't having that revenue come in, you mentioned people were getting furloughs, hours cut, salary reductions, all of that was ongoing with our organization as well too. So I realized I need to shift my mindset, and I need to do something to change, and I need to find something fast, because this is definitely not viable for me and not what I want to be doing in my career. I mean, this company probably might be shutting down soon, so I need to do what's best for me and my family.
Right. And so what was that mindset shift? Can't talk tonight. What was that mindset shift like for you? And walk us through how that all kind of evolved for you as well.
Sure. So it actually came out of one of our sessions that we talked about in our group for the Show Up 2020 Challenge, where we talked about how do you put your best foot forward and how do you sell yourself to a potential employer? Prior to my experience in government contracting, I did manage a business. And so I was very familiar with brokering those relationships with clients, building up that pipeline, and, holding myself and my company accountable, and also holding my prospective client accountable, trying to get those, understand their needs and find the best solution for them. I had almost like an aha moment where I realized, wait a minute, I'm that client and I am trying to sell myself to these potential employers. I need to be putting my best foot forward, and I need to be selling myself. And just as in a sales process where you follow up and you say, I will send you this proposal by Thursday afternoon at 4:00, I need to be doing the same thing in my communications with these potential employers. I need to be accountable for myself, but I also need to feel okay that I can hold them accountable at the same time and say, I understand things are very busy. I really enjoyed our conversation. Is there any further feedback you can give me, or any insight into the next steps, so that I can accurately plan for, what I need to do in my job search? So it really was that aha moment in our group session that got me thinking and changed my mindset completely. And I refocused my resume, refocused my job search, and said, this has to be my number one priority. I've got to make sure that I can get myself into something that's more secure.
And I remember that point as well. And that's one of the many things in the powerful component of the group that we have with the Show Up Challenge. And so if you are curious about learning more of that, stay tuned to the very end, because I'll tell you more information about how you can become a part of the next Show Up Challenge. But that aha that you had really stemmed from everything that you had said, and tying into it too was you recognizing your value that you were able to bring to a new organization.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And so when we talked in group and we talked in one-on-one as well with the coaching sessions, what was the thing that was important for you to message forward in your communication, particularly around the value that you were bringing to a new organization?
So really the biggest thing that I needed to portray. As we have discussed in several of our conversations before, you can have really great project managers, or you can have mediocre project managers. But how can you differentiate yourself? Everybody knows what a project manager does, no matter what the industry is. That they're there to monitor the project, control the risk, manage all of the financial pieces and the scope. But what's the value that I bring? And so I really tried to shift my discussion points when I was having those in-person interviews, and not just talk about, I managed this wonderful project with DHS. We had excellent CPARs from the government, but I said, I am an expert in helping organizations to mitigate their risks and help them develop emergency plans and bringing together teams to accomplish that mission, and focusing on what the company's mission is, to show that's where I can excel, and that's the value that I bring.
So Claire, that's absolute gold. And it was such an important aha for you that I want you to go back and say that value statement again for everybody so they can hear it a second time.
Sure thing. So I am an expert in helping organizations to identify and mitigate risks, and helping them to develop emergency action plans so that they can prepare for any natural or man-made event that might happen at their organization.
Yeah. And so we took all of your experiences and narrowed it down in a few sentences in what I like to call a unique professional value statement that you could share at a networking event, you could share during an interview. And the whole purpose of that is to get someone interested in learning more about you rather than finding you interesting. Right? How oftentimes have we said, we've said this in group, we've said this in one-on-one, and if you're listening to this, right, we're all interesting. But when you're networking with somebody, when you're interviewing with someone, you have to hook them in. You have to get them interested in learning more about you because there's something that piques your interest. And in your unique professional value statement, when you say that I'm an expert in helping, and you go from there right away, that sounds different, right? How many times have we gone into interviews, or we've talked to our friends and our coworkers, and they've gone into interviews and they'll say, well, I'm a program manager, or I'm an accountant, or I'm an attorney, or whatever. And we miss the whole point about our value because we hide it behind the title. Title doesn't matter. The title matters in a sense of where you are recognized on the org chart, but your value is so key. And that was such a big shift for you. And so you go through these interviews, but before we can even get there, talk to us a little bit about the crickets you heard in your whole job search process.
Sure. So I mentioned that, back in September, I had several contingent offers. None of the contracts went through. So I was continuing on in my search. I found an organization. Actually, I had an interview while I was on vacation down at the beach. And it sounded like a very interesting organization. I had a wonderful initial call with them. It was on a Friday. I got back on Sunday, send them a follow-up email that Monday, just saying, I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope to connect with the rest of the team soon. A standard follow-up thank you email that you would send after you have those types of conversations. And it was crickets for weeks. I didn't hear anything. And so, we mentioned in group, we discussed this, and I said, is it okay? Because it's been about 2.5 weeks now, and I haven't heard anything. Is it okay? Is it appropriate to reach back out? And so we were able to craft something being very complimentary, yet asking for more information, stressing the fact, I understand that you are quite busy with all the competing priorities that you have going on. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I would love for the opportunity to follow up and have a secondary conversation with your team. And so that really sort of then helped, because that following day, I actually got a response back saying, I'm so sorry. As you mentioned, yes, we have had a lot of competing priorities and projects starting recently. Would you be available to have a phone call with our team tomorrow at this time? So it really got the ball rolling for that next follow-up step with the organization.
And to show up and communicate in that kind of way where you're being kind and respectful and you're waiting to hear from them. What was the shift for you in terms of sending that email in the way that you did to really just get an answer about where you were in the whole pipeline for this position?
Sure. So, what I wanted to do was show them that, I understand that you have a lot going on, and I understand we are all very busy professionals, especially in the line of work that this organization is in the fact that they're helping to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic. So they are very, very busy, and just really reassure them and say, that this was something that I enjoyed. I'm very interested in your organization. There's a lot of crossover for me based upon my professional experience and what my interests are in the sciences. And I really would like the opportunity to speak with you. And I think that helped to catch their attention again.
Right. And if you think about it, and obviously we don't know exactly what was going on in their minds when they got the email and everything, but from a hiring manager's perspective, from someone whom, would potentially be your boss, let's say, do you want to hire someone who is going to acknowledge all of the other things that may be competing for time and it's not all about you? Or do you want to hire someone that's like very, I'm just going to use the term unprofessionally aggressive in being, hey, where am I at? I haven't heard from you in 3 weeks. There's such a difference in the tone, or even in the way that something like that could potentially be received. So there was a lot of relationship building that you did through this entire interview process, which was fantastic because it obviously got you to where you are right now. And so one of the really cool things in all of this story, though, is that wasn't your only offer, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So what happened there?
Sure. So in the meantime, while I was waiting to hear back from the organization, I wasn't going to put all my eggs in one basket. I wasn't going to give up. I was continuing to search and find other opportunities because, I needed to make sure that I had all my options available to me. I was going to continue to be tenacious, not really aggressive, but professionally aggressive. That same day, I actually got a call from another employer that I had submitted a resume to, and had a great conversation with him and had a follow-up interview with them the following day. So within the course of, let's say 48 hours, I had 2 initial interviews set up and then follow-up interviews. I believe I had 7 total, like initial calls, secondary interviews, talk to this person. It was almost lightning speed how fast everything went, where it was just up until that point, it was waiting, crickets. Okay, now everybody wants to talk to me all of a sudden.
Yep. And all of this is happening in that time frame, really between Labor Day and Thanksgiving. So
Yes.
What we typically have seen years past is that there is this push to do the last bit of a hiring push leading up to Thanksgiving. And in this unusual year, in what I have seen and in talking with recruiters and hiring managers that I'm connected with as well, there's still a big push to go through the end of the year, and in part because this year has been so epic. So if you are out there and you're hearing crickets and you're getting frustrated and you've got resumes that are out there and you're waiting to hear about interviews and things, keep applying. Like Claire mentioned, don't put all your eggs into one basket, but recognize that there is still time and there may be factors impeding someone reaching out to you just because of whatever their company is particularly dealing with. And take Claire's advice and her guidance in terms of considering what would a potential email look like for you to communicate with your point of contact, the HR person, the recruiter, the hiring manager, just to see exactly where you are in this process. Because in this year, so many things can happen, and your story is so encouraging that you actually can level up and find a new job even in a pandemic. So kudos and congratulations to you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. All right. So Claire, if you could give a piece of advice to somebody to help them show up a little bit more energetically or authentically in their next interview, what would that be?
I would just highlight what worked for me is really to figure out what is your value statement? What are you going to bring to the table that's different than, John Doe? What is your expertise, and how can you showcase that's going to get the hiring manager's attention? If you think about it, you have 30 to 60 seconds or so to make an impression. So what's the one thing that you want to say and get out of the gate right away to catch their attention and keep the conversation going and keep their interest in you as a candidate?
Well said. Absolutely. So you and I have known each other, I'm thinking probably almost 6 months now. We had connected through LinkedIn and everything. When I launched the Show Up Challenge, which was a 3-month program that combined an element of self-study, group coaching, one-on-one coaching, what was the big decision for you or your reasoning behind joining the Show Up Challenge when you did back in September?
Sure. So, when we started talking, I was looking for somebody to assist me because I was getting pretty frustrated with my search, and I, needed a little bit of guidance to figure out, what can I do to move things forward. They always say it's easier to find a job when you have a job. Well, it's not really the case during a pandemic,
Nope.
but just the fact that we could have our conversations, which was very, very helpful, but the group that was put together is such an amazing, supportive, wonderful group of professional people. And just the fact that we could have those conversations amongst one another during our group calls or on our Facebook group, and really just get advice from one another and have that support system was so very helpful for me in my job search.
No, thank you for that. And I, when the group all came together and in this iteration, we had 5 people in the group. And I said to you from the very beginning, I'm like, you're all perfect. Like, this is a perfect combination of mid-career professionals who are coming together from different companies and industries and backgrounds and experiences. And from the first session, you all just supported each other and gelled with each other and clicked. And it just made this whole 3-month journey to be what each and every one of you got out of it. So I'm so glad that not only you were a part of the challenge, but that also you got so much out of it and really defined for you what it means for you to show up, and took all of that information and leveraged that into a brand new position. So I wish you nothing but the best of success with all this new position has to offer you, and that's to come.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah. So Claire, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and sharing your story. It's an amazing story. And again, something that I hope everyone listening here today is going to take something away from it, whether they're interviewing or they're just going through their job transition process. You really gave people a lot to think about. And I thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
I'm very glad to have the opportunity. And again, thank you so much for all of your wonderful support.
It's my pleasure. You are most welcome. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen. If you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you would leave me a rating and review to let me know what you think, to help others find this podcast and continue to bring you relevant and useful content to help you navigate what's next for your career. And if you're ready to create your mid-career GPS and get rid of the overwhelm so you can find the job you'll love or love the job you have, visit my website at johnnarrell.com for more information about joining my private Facebook group and scheduling a free consult with me so we can start building your mid-career GPS together. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Narrell Coaching. I'll see you next time.